All right, folks, it's time for the news in World Edition. And of course, we'll have world politics later on this evening at 5 o'clock. But right now, we're going to be dealing with what's going on in the world, and we'll see who else pops in among the regular panelists and all along those lines. But the Israeli Hamas war is continuing, and they're saying that there is a humanitarian crisis that is worsening in Gaza as the fighting is intensifying. So, that is definitely what some people are saying. As a matter of fact, there's even reports from some agencies of it being a humanitarian catastrophe. Some people are saying that it is apocalyptic conditions that are existing there as well. And apparently, there are some people in London that are seeking to revolt against what their Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been doing. And apparently, he is trying to prevent a right wing revolt with some of the toughest immigration laws that they've had, and all along those lines. But Robert Jenrick resigned as an immigration minister over the Rwanda legislation. So Sunak is saying that the Rwanda bill will stop people being able to challenge deportation. So that is something else that is going on as well. And apparently, Putin is visiting Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates on a Middle East tour, and Gaza is on the agenda. As the Russian president heads to the UAE and Saudi Arabia. So he's making one of those rare foreign trips to the Gulf states and all along those lines. So that is something that is going on. And apparently, Russia had a school shooting, and apparently, there have been school shootings both in Russia and in the United States. Because in Russia's school shooting, a teenage girl killed her classmates and herself in that particular incident. The young lady was 14 and shot a fellow pupil dead at the Russian school before killing herself. And of course, we've all been hearing about what happened in Las Vegas at the UNLV and all along those lines. So definitely there'll be probably some calls around gun violence and all in that space. As a matter of fact, I think that Biden was supposed to be heading to that particular uh, state to talk about one other issue, but I'm sure that the issues may be changing, and he may be talking about gun violence now as well. So that is something that is on his itinerary, is a trip to Las Vegas, and definitely it can be an interesting place to go. I've been there once in my life, and who knows, maybe I'll get a chance to go back there again. But definitely, there's a number of great events that are going there. As a matter of fact, I think the NBA Cups are supposed to be played there, and a number of other things that are exciting that people might be heading to if they're going to the Las Vegas area and all in that kind of space. We've been talking for a while about the Venezuelan president and Guyana, and apparently the U.S. is throwing its weight behind Guyana in the territorial dispute with Venezuela. And the Venezuelan president has ordered the creation of a new state and map, including land from Guyana. And Guyana has boasted its security and engages the U.S. to defend land from Venezuela. So Maduro over there in Venezuela has mobilized the army and announces annexation of Esquibio. So I think that that's the part that is the contested area and all along those lines. And speaking of Latin America, the ex-Peruvian president Fujimori is freed from prison on humanitarian grounds, and he's been freed after 16 years in prison. And apparently, he was a very divisive leader in that part of the area. And Seychelles has declared a state of emergency after a huge explosion in that area. So, a huge explosion flattened buildings in Seychelles, which is another country in the world as well. And it looks like journalist Isam Abdallah was killed by an Israeli tank firing in quick succession. So Reuters and AFP are saying that Israeli attack was responsible for the deadly attack on the journalist who was killed in that particular kind of situation. It's one of the reasons that I never want to be a war correspondent is it can be some very dangerous work and all along those lines. And China is warning against the undermining of the Belt and Road plan after Italy withdraws. So definitely, Italy tells China it will exit the Belt and Road Investment Pact. So that is something else that we are seeing in the news as well. And a pro-Russian Ukrainian MP, Ilya Kava, was shot dead in a Moscow suburb. So that is something else that we are saying as well. Ukraine claims killing of traitor ex-MP Ilya Kivia in Russia. So definitely Ukraine is saying that it assassinated that ex-lawmaker near Moscow. And Israel is allowing a limited amount of fuel into Gaza as UN chief sounds alarm over humanitarian collapse. So, following the U.S. pressure, Israel approves an increase of fuel deliveries to Gaza. So, that is something that the Israeli War Cabinet voted to increase as IDF has backed Hamas into a corner. And I was watching a news story yesterday where they said that they might be flooding some of the tunnels in order to get to the Hamas terrorists and all along those lines. So that attack may be coming on very soon and all along those lines. And definitely there's a number of other things, including a teenager that was freed with the dog, says the pooch escaped the captor's notice and that particular dog provided support while they were being held hostage and all along those lines. So sometimes you can sneak something in that they can aid you as well. So that is something that is also going on in the world. And the UK says Russian intelligence is behind a sustained attempt to meddle in British democracy. So I know that that was something that was accused even here in the United States, but UK names FSB unit behind the hack and leak campaign and has summoned Russian ambassador. So definitely it looks like the UK is saying Russia targeted politicians in an email hacking campaign. And of course, the other big news that was on yesterday was the debates. I only saw some of the post report. I did not watch the debate myself. I was actually too busy paying attention to my alma mater, who had bounced back from their loss to Wisconsin with a victory with Texas. So I did watch some of the post report, and a lot of people seem to be surprised that Christie actually had some kind words for Nikki Haley, and a lot of people are wondering now if Vivek Ramaswamy is just being a surrogate for Trump and all along those lines. And of course, Nikki Haley was getting some pushback for some of the money that she had received from major donors and all along those lines. And I'm sure others that might have watched more closely might have some other ideas as to what was going on in that space as well. And apparently, the White House has condemned university presidents after a contentious congressional hearing, and college presidents are under fire after dodging questions about anti Semitism. And definitely, that is something that was going on in those Washington hearings. And apparently, Rick Santorum is back. He was the patron saint of every 2024 long shot campaign. So maybe he's going to be doing some other campaign work as well. And Congress is debating Ukraine funding, and the U.S. has announced more military aid. But U.S. Senate Republicans are blocking Ukraine and Israel aid bill over the border dispute. And I did hear a quote from former President Trump that if he is elected, because they were asking him if he was going to be a dictator if elected, and he did say that on day one he would be building that wall, and he would also be drilling, and drilling again. So he did say that that is on his agenda, was getting this wall down there on the Latin American side, and also apparently doing some heavy drilling as well. So he said that that's going to be right out the gate if he wins on day one. And it looks like Representative McCarthy will be resigning 2 months after his historic ouster as House Speaker. So he is set to resign and leave Congress at the end of the year. So that is something else that we are seeing in the news. And definitely Donald Trump is back in court today as the New York fraud trial is nearing its end. And last but not least, it looks like recreational marijuana is now legal in Ohio. So if you want to get some recreational marijuana in Ohio, it looks like you can get it and all in those lines. As a matter of fact, the Ohio Governor Mike DeWine is the one that called on lawmakers to pass the recreational marijuana bill. And definitely it looks like that might have gone through and all along those lines. So definitely it'll be interesting to see. And it'll apparently, even if you're the parent of the kid of a politician, you can get yourself in trouble as well, because a North Dakota senator says his son was involved in the police chase and crash that killed the sheriff's deputy. So North Dakota Senator Kevin Cramer's son was in the police chase that ended in that deputy's death and all along those lines. And speaking of folks that are related and all in that space, I am trying to get, because I've reached out to her, Elizabeth Gaddy, to come on. I believe that's the young lady's name, but she is the granddaughter of former Senator Jesse Helms, and apparently does not agree with him in terms of the Helms Amendment and is very much into the uh, rights of women and a supporter of some of the things in that space. So in that case, she's actually trying to overturn her granddaddy and all in that space. And I have reached out to her, and we'll see if she will come on at a later time to talk about her relationship with her granddad when he was living, and also how she is now maybe working on the opposite side of the aisle. And last but not least, let's not to forget that today is the anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attacks. So centenarian survivors, and yes, there are some of those, of the Pearl Harbor attack are returning to honor those who perished 82 years ago. So flags are to fly at half-staff, honoring the lives lost during the Pearl Harbor attack 82 years later. So definitely that will be going on today over there in Hawaii and all along those lines. So that's some of the news that I know about. I'm going to bring in Dan Worthington, who I think might have served, if I remember correctly, and all along those lines, and see if he's got any reflections and thoughts on Pearl Harbor. I've also got Shaquille Latimer from Down Under, Nick Palveda, and of course, Sasha Starr from Canada. But Dan, am I correct in thinking that you served probably way after that Pearl Harbor, but maybe you have some reflections as is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I came in tail end of the Vietnam War. My grandfather did serve in World War II in Patton's army. He was a tank sergeant. My father-in-law served in World War II as a fighter pilot and as a and then in Korea as a enlisted Army soldier, fighter. And so we have people in our family line that served. My father also served in the Army. He was stationed in Panama. He cocked his commander and got booted.
Always have some great stories there, Dan.
He probably deserved it.
Right.
The commander probably deserved it. My dad's 6'4", and it doesn't suffer fools.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense and everything. But yeah, I just wanted to honor that and everything. Shaquille, you oftentimes bring us thoughts from Australia and everything, and you definitely study a lot of American history and all along those lines. So I don't know how much Australia pays attention to the history of World War II and Pearl Harbor, but I just wondered if you had any reflections, and then I'll get to Sasha and Nick as well.
I think everybody pays attention to cataclysmic events that occurred in World War II. But look, I mean, I'm obviously not old enough to really have a great deal of direct experience of the going-ons during that time. So I might defer to Sasha and Nick, who are a little bit more aware of the time period that we're talking about.
Definitely. Nick, any thoughts about World War II and Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, it was a date that will live in infamy, which is like the day the
Yeah.
Ponzi were opened, but that's another story. Yeah, actually, my father, my uncles, a lot of them served in World War II because it wasn't like they had a choice. That was kind of
No.
here's the choices to go serve. And that was it.
Mm.
Fortunately, none
Mm.
of them they all came back. A lot of people that served in World War II, they didn't come back.
Right.
Part of it was my dad was scheduled to be an infantryman on this thing called D-Day, and then he was in a flight school and decided to fail out on purpose. A good time to fail out, and then they put him behind the lines because obviously he wasn't qualified to go on the D-Day offensive. So sometimes when you fail, it's the best thing in your life because you may not be coming back. A lot of the infantrymen, they didn't come back on D-Day. They went out, gone. They hit the beaches and then they were gone. That was it. And the sad part, he goes, some of them, what they did is they took the best and the brightest and they put them on the front lines, thinking that, oh, these guys will be real smart. They just got slaughtered. And we lost a lot of our good people during D-Day. Of course, I got all these stories, you know, you got to, how much are true, I don't know, but it definitely wasn't a good thing. Then the collateral damage that took place on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I know they're talking about this with Israel, but if you look at the collateral damage that the U.S. created, like 100,000 people, civilians, women, children, and if you look at what we did in Iraq, 200,000 Iraqi women, children died as collateral damage. What's going on in Israel right now? 7,500, not even close to the numbers that we're seeing in World War II or in the Iraqi war. Yet because of social media, there's a lot more blah, 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 blah about it, where years ago they would actually suppress it. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, interesting. Hey, Sasha, you were served, and you are from Ukraine, but you also served in the Russian army. So I was just wondering how much of that kind of conversation was even part of your military education, whether they talked about the war in Pearl Harbor and even that attack, which was a surprise attack, and all along those lines. So I just wondered if that was something that was even discussed in training, some of these American incidents and some of these American wars and all along those lines.
Just to clarify, I served in the Soviet army, not the Russian army.
Clarify.
And of course, Ukraine was at that time part of Soviet Union. My late father, he ended the war in Berlin in 1945. And at the time, it was believed that it will be a better world and some opportunities would open up. Obviously not in Russia. Maybe it became a better world for Germany, for Japan. For some reason, the losing nations, they did extremely well after Second World War, much better than winning nations, including Soviet Union. But that's a twist of history, and maybe that was a grand design. United States did very well with the Marshall Plan, and that's obviously the reason why Germany and Japan did so well. And we'll see now what's going to happen. Right now, I think that the world is really have to rethink what's happening right now, because obviously the Potsdam Yalta conference world is no longer functioning. It's history now, because with the United States and the West allowing Russia to get out of nothing, out of its deathbed, and become so strong, and in spite of their fighting war with Ukraine, it's a primitive way how they fight. There is no genius tactics or anything, but just by sheer numbers and by this extremely numerous artillery and other like tanks, for example, other weapons, and sometimes they're using weapons since Second World War. They're using tanks, T-34, which were actually brought Russia victory ultimately in Second World War, and now they're talking to Germans and say, look, you forgot about T-34s? We can remind you. And Germany now is horrified that if Ukraine will be defeated, which is quite a possibility, especially if US will stop its help, then Germany has only 1 to 3 years to prepare for the Russian assault. And by that time, most likely Trump will be in power, and Trump will say, "We don't need Ukraine, we don't need Germany, we don't need Poland, we don't need France, we don't need UK, we don't need anybody, we don't need anything. We are going to go in our little fortress. We will defend US against Canada and Mexico. We are capable of doing that." Oh, really? And what are you going to do against BRICS, who will say, not only say, they're already working on the new gold-baked currency, which will kill US dollars. And killing of US dollars with $34 trillion worth of debt, US is all but finished. You will defend against Mexico and Canada. That's okay. But other than that, it's finished, done.
Along those same lines, and just going to another part of the conversation.
I don't think so.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask about that, and everybody's thoughts around that. And if Jacoby wants to jump in on Pearl Harbor, which is what we were talking about, he can. But one of the things I was curious about, because you mentioned BRICS, and we did see today that I believe it's today or maybe it's tomorrow that the full meeting is going to take place, that Putin is heading to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So do we think that this is going to be an attempt to add them to the BRICS alliance and all along those lines? Because as you just said, Russia is part of that alliance. So are they going to try to recruit? And of course, they've all got their own concerns as well, including what's going on in Israel and between Israel and Hamas. But do you think Mr. Putin is going to try to recruit those two countries to come into BRICS? They have plenty of oil and plenty of money. Anybody? Shaquille, you're into foreign trade, into foreign.
The United Emirates, which has been spelled incorrectly, whoever's put that up there. The United Arab Emirates has already been in conversation with the BRICS nations, so a number of others. So, and that to me makes perfect sense, because the BRICS nations are obviously going to become a lot stronger. And the idea, as I've mentioned so many times before, if you've got 30% of the world's economy, which is close to 1/3 of the world's economy under sanction, that's a very big trading bloc, and it makes sense that trading bloc is going to try to trade with each other, and then to try to increase their the potential trading partners around the world. So I think that's going to happen, and I think that weakens the position of the West when it comes to simply putting monetary or financial or economic sanctions or retaliations against a country. From what it appears with what's happened with Russia, putting them under sanction didn't really help very much. Not much really, it hasn't really disrupted them by all appearances. So I think it's very important for us to note that and start to look at other alternatives.
Well, I have to kind of call Sasha on something that he said. First of all, I don't think that Ukraine would be in war with Russia today if Donald Trump were to have been elected president, because he would have put Putin in his place and Putin would have backed down. Reason Putin thought he could get away with it is Joe Biden sort of begged it on, because he wanted the industrial military complex to benefit from this war. No, this is all about economics and war. Trump was trying to complete all the wars, trying to get our people out, that kind of thing. I think if Russia invaded Germany, Trump would not abandon our NATO allies. I think you're wrong about that. I think that he would be a very strong deterrence against Putin. And so, we differ on that. It's okay that we differ on that. But I see him as a much stronger leader, even though I don't support him becoming president. He's a much stronger leader than Biden is right now, because Biden is perceived as weak on everything in the world. And we are vulnerable because of him and his and his
Well, and that's
policy.
a good. And Mark, thank you for giving me on. I can only stay for about 10 minutes, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've just been traveling extensively. I'm traveling again today, so I've got to go to the airport. But and I'll promise folks by the end of the year I'll be hosting the show more. It's great to see Dan Worthington, by the way. It's been a while. But that's a good segue into what I was going to talk about today. And first of all, what is the leadership opportunity for the Republicans? The fourth presidential debate yesterday, Trump clearly the front runner. I was in Washington a few days ago, and some political operatives were saying Nikki Haley may be the best person to run because of the age difference. That if she were to win the nomination, there'd be a 50-year age difference between Biden and Nikki Haley. But I don't know whether it does look like most of the people are lining up behind her. Yesterday, there really wasn't a clear winner. It seemed like everyone was ganging up on Nikki Haley, Ramaswamy, and DeSantis fighting. I think everyone's fighting for that number 2 spot. Whether that means they're fighting for VP to be with Trump, whether it's a Trump-Haley ticket, which might help Trump, And so anyway, that's something to talk about. But meanwhile, Republicans are blocking Ukraine aid on the notion that McConnell is saying that we want to have border restrictions. We've got Putin pushing for another 6-year term, two more 6-year terms. So he's going to be there till he dies, unless he's assassinated. But Dan, the point I'm trying to make is that this is a consistent theme that Republicans are saying that the world is not a safer place having Joe Biden in the White House, and that we need Donald Trump in there again because we need a leader that is feared. Whether Trump is the right guy to do it is yet to be determined, but clearly he will be the nominee of your party unless something changes. Would you like Nikki Haley to be the nominee? Or
No, she's too weak, and I just don't like her politics. I think she's more she's more of a globalist type. I don't support her. No, I don't. I just don't know who. We have a leadership void right now.
Yeah.
And that's really the problem. I mean, the Democrats really don't have anybody qualified who has a spine, and the Republicans don't have anybody that'll stand up for freedom, liberty, and the American way of life. They just won't. Trump does. I don't know if he's sincere about it. I think he is. But we need a champion. We need a champion of freedom, democracy, and the American way of life. It's to stand up for all people. Everyone was better off with Trump in office than Biden. Everyone is far worse off with Biden and his policies. Jacoby, you shake your head, but the truth is, yes, they were. He had policies that made America strong and energy independent, and even many of the minority groups were making positive advances under his administration. Jacoby, the Democrats have been enslaving your people for so many years. They're the party of the Ku Klux Klan. They're the party against the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s, and they remain the same kind of deceivers that they've always been.
Hey, and real quickly before I leave, and it's great to see Kimberly Calhoun, the fellow of our network. I did want to give and we'll talk about this probably on Monday when I'm back. Today's Pearl Harbor. Want to remember December 7th, 1941, a day which, and I mean, I'm going to go do a message from the War Memorial today, but in Cary, but the 2,400 dead, 68 civilians. How many battleships? I think 9 Navy ships, 8 battleships, and and only one World War II veteran, a Pearl Harbor survivor. His name is he just turned 102. Nick Contour, who was on the USS Atlantic. Imagine that, it's just. But anyway, I'm going to leave you guys. Have a great show. Be back on Monday, and things are really moving fast. Jacoby, your floor is yours. Thank you all so much.
Jacoby.
Just want to point out just a couple of things before getting back to talking about Pearl Harbor. Trump is about Trump. He doesn't care about anybody else. His platform, even currently, is a platform of vengeance. He has no platform for everybody. He's talking about retribution. Historically speaking, the Democrat Party started the KKK in the civil rights era when JFK and MLK Jr. and everything else and all that stuff was happening at that time. That's when the Dixiecrats and the Klan supporting Democrats left out of the Democrat Party because they were frustrated with what was happening during that time. In the 60s and 70s is when the Republican Party and honestly Nixon and all the ideas came about that they were going to court the actual the upset and the disillusioned, frustrated Caucasians just because they left that party and saw them as a voting bloc. This is where the Southern strategy came into play. In the 70s and 80s, well, in the 70s, when Nixon created the Southern strategy, that's what grabbed all those Dixiecrats and so on and so forth to pull into the Republican Party. So, Dan, yes, before the civil rights era, yes, the KKK was supportive of the Democrat Party. When the civil rights era hit, they left that party. And yes, I will not say that racism is beholden to one party or racism is only in one party. Every party has it. Racism.
Okay, so how do you explain Senator Byrd?
Let me finish.
How do you explain
and then you
Senator
can
Byrd?
ask. Let me finish real quick and then you can ask. And so racism isn't beholden to any party. However, the Klan itself right now is a conservative ideology or they vote for the conservative ideology because they feel they were courted with the Southern strategy. So therefore, it's you can't say that the Democrat Party is the party of the Klan. It's history and evolution has changed that based on what's happened.
Explain Senator Byrd.
Senator Byrd was a reformed Klansman that
he was the grand wizard.
Dan, you asked me to explain it. You asked me to explain it, and that's what I'm doing. Senator Byrd, who was actually championed by every single senator, House member, and president at that time as a reformed Klansman. He was at his funeral, was thanked, and actually you can read articles about Bush saying how great this individual was. Senator Byrd became a talking point, just as the talking point of the Democrat Party is the party of the Klan, because the fact those individuals who use that talking point forget that history, forget that.
Okay. So the Democrat Party,
it doesn't stop. So Senator Robert Byrd became a reformed Klansman and actually fought against the actual problems and fought to help the civil rights movement. That is all history and documented.
The Democratic Party maintain the victimhood of Black people everywhere, take away their power, and do not create freedom and opportunity for Black people. And what they're doing is destroying the opportunities for everyone. They're destroying the middle class. So our tax system is most hurtful with people who are working Americans who are trying to support the economy and that kind of thing. It's most helpful to the rich liberals and the rich Republicans. I agree. And then everybody underneath that pay no taxes are just sort of expected to be on the dole. And the problem with that is that they don't gain a sense of enterprise and building up and a vision for the future. And the thing is, America has opportunities for everyone. It's still that way. It's becoming less that way under Joe Biden, but it is a land of opportunity. Jacoby, you're an example of that. So you have this gaming business that you have, right? I mean, you're going to go big. You're going to make big money, and it's going to work for you, and you'll be able to use your skills and your verbosity and other things to advance your career. Mark, you're the same. You're an announcer for Pod TV. You're one of the producers, and you've had a successful journalism career. So there are opportunities for everyone if they just go and work through those. Now, Donald Trump supported the black colleges like no other president did before. He created opportunity zones, and he did many other things. Increased the employment rate among Black Americans and Hispanics and everyone else. So I don't know. Joe Biden has destroyed many of those opportunities with his policies, and he has hurt many Americans with his policies, made us weaker. And so, I mean, it's just
Dan,
true.
this may actually surprise some folks and everything. I wanted to hear from Jatovia as well, because I was actually thinking about this yesterday. It might even surprise Shaquille, because he's asked me this a couple of times. But there are policies that came out of the Republican Party, including some that Trump has had, that I actually think are worth examining. And I've even mentioned some of these before. I've said before on numerous shows that I actually think, because it was a Richard Nixon policy, that enterprise zones are a valid solution and something that we should be examining. Now, I will tell you all this because I've never said it before on the network, but I actually think in some ways that the notion of workfare should be examined, because a lot of times people get welfare and they get the welfare and they get the check and they don't necessarily have anything attached to it. Whereas workfare is asking them to do a job and get paid for it and then get the money and not just get the money handed down to them. That may surprise you, Shaquille, that I said that. But yes, I think that workfare needs to be acknowledged as a possibility. I'm not saying it is a total solution, but it is a possibility, as I understand it, as something that should be looked at and examined.
There's a number of changes that many Western countries that find itself in a similar predicament can enact. I just want to come back to the debates, though. You'd be lucky to have watched the debates live, the Republican debate, because it was, where was it showing? News Nation, Newsmax, whatever it was. But look, I'm not sure from the candidates that are on there. I'm really not sure that there's anyone there that can realistically displace Donald Trump on the Republican ticket. I think it's pretty clear Donald Trump's going to end up with it. Chris Christie, he really, it's probably time for him to start bowing out. I can't imagine he's going to be around on that stage for much longer. Vivek Ramaswamy, he's essentially acting like a proxy for Donald Trump. He makes some reasonable points. I think he comes across as attacking the other people on the stage. I think that Ron DeSantis has probably had a disappointing campaign, given the amount of momentum that was behind him when he first started out. I think that the idea that the voters are not saying no, they're just saying not now, is probably accurate. But as for Nikki Haley, I think the Republicans have a very serious issue here, which is that ordinarily she would probably be somebody that the Republicans would all get behind. But because she is now becoming, or she's considered to be, an establishment Republican by the very strong sort of Donald Trump Republican base that are becoming very anti-establishment, that becomes quite frustrating, I think, for the Republican Party as to what their future is going to be. And I'll renew what I've said before. If Donald Trump wins the next election, or if he doesn't, I seriously doubt he'd make another run for it if he doesn't win it. If he does win it, well, obviously he can't run again. So what does the Republican Party look like? What are they going to do after that? I think the same question really has to be asked of the Democrats. If Joe Biden was, for some reason, to drop out, the obvious person to come up would be Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom. And Gavin Newsom probably wouldn't want to do it because of the potential for a claim of racism against him if he was to displace Kamala Harris. But what happens after that? Who's going to be the fresh blood in the 2028 election? I think that's going to be very interesting. I think we're beginning to see some of the candidates that are going to be future leaders of the Republicans. I'm not sure that we're seeing that in the Democrats just yet. It was very interesting that Joe Biden made a statement. I think it was an unscripted statement where he said, I'm not the only one that can beat Donald Trump. At least 50 of them can beat Donald Trump, 50 other Democrats. But I have to run because he's running. Then somebody asked him, well, if he wasn't running, or if he dropped out, he'd drop out. And he goes, well, no, I'm not going to do that at this point. Now, to be fair, I don't think he quite meant to articulate it in that way, but it does show a very interesting situation where the two leaders of the two political parties in the United States are basically in it, to one up each other. And I do feel that the best interests of American people are probably being left behind as these two egos are there. Just lastly, I'll just say in relation to the Republican Party, a lot of people have said, would Vivek Ramaswamy be likely to be Donald Trump's VP? I don't think so. I think that Donald Trump has too big an ego. I don't think he'd want to be upstaged by Vivek Ramaswamy. I think probably Nikki Haley would look like somebody who could definitely be his VP, although she has previously said that she didn't want the position. And look, she was somebody that a year ago everyone was like, oh, yeah, before there was any sort of thought about who the nominees would be. Oh, yeah, she's really great. She's a great Republican. She's somebody that even Democrats can respect, et cetera, et cetera. And then you get into the turvy, the sort of argumentative debates and what goes on in political debates and party debates, and all of a sudden, you see these internal divisions within the party. So, be interesting to see.
I've heard some people say that Vivek Ramaswamy may be trying to campaign now that he is not a front runner and everything for Nikki's old job. So there are definitely some people that are saying that he was going for the VP, but one of his things that he is drilled on is a lack of foreign experience. So some people are saying that he is literally lobbying for an ambassadorship job. And
I don't think that that's what he'd be going for, but I certainly would suggest that Donald Trump would be well served to put him into his cabinet somewhere. I'm not sure exactly what role, but you'd want to find a place for him. Either that or make him the press secretary, because I think that him doing battle with the press every day would probably be a healthy change.
It would be interesting and everything. I actually got a letter, an email, and I was going to bring this up as well because it is involving a space of the world that unfortunately had a disaster. And we can get into a whole conversation around gun control, but the Hispanic vote is also very important. And Kelly Jones, who has been on a couple of our shows, sent me a email that was from CNN. It was definitely a number of the Hispanics that were being courted in Nevada, for lack of a better term, because Hispanics were just 70% of Nevada's population when Reagan was elected, but are 30% now. And it's amazing of the political power that that voting bloc is creating in the state of Nevada. So some people are looking at the electoral map because that is a one of those states that is under is a toss-up, and people are looking to try to win that state and everything. As a matter of fact, Nevada has backed the Democrat for president in 4 consecutive. Nevada has backed the Democrat for president in 4 consecutive elections, but only by 2 points in 2020. And there is evidence of a modest GOP inroads with Hispanic voters in both 2020 and 22 elections. And it's not hard to find signs of openings for further Republican gains in 2024, which is part of the reason that Kelly sent me this article and everything, because it does look like that is
have decreased quite dramatically in a number of key voting blocks. The Hispanic community, the Black community, women, college-educated women as well. We have seen him dropping in poll results in Gen Zs and especially a very precipitous drop in millennial support. But the very big but here is that is what the poll results are showing now. We're just under a year away from the elections. So there's a lot that's going to happen next year. Is Joe Biden pretty much plateauing at the moment, and we're not going to see any further deterioration in how he appears to be getting more frail, or is he going to be pretty much the way he is now? Big elephant in the room, of course, is what happens with Donald Trump and all of these charges he's on. Chris Christie, I think, made the comment that he wouldn't be able to vote himself, and that'd be very interesting, because if he wants to be locked up temporarily even, and he's a presidential candidate, he's not allowed to vote in the election, but other people can vote for him. Then would he be able to pardon himself? These questions is uncharted waters,
Sure.
Despite Eugene v. Debs. But this is the interesting thing, and what does the electorate then say? Do Republicans come out and say, well, yeah, we're going to vote for him anyway? Or would they prefer to have voted for somebody like Ron DeSantis, but he's been displaced by Nikki Haley? I mean, this is going to be a very interesting situation for Republicans, and I think that the poll results that Joe Biden has at the moment doesn't mean that he's out of the race. And without all of that turmoil, it doesn't mean that things can't dramatically improve, both politically, economically, and otherwise, and make Joe Biden and the Democrats look a lot better. So, again, I don't think it's a sure thing either way here. I think that this election could go to either party. And if it is Joe Biden, Donald Trump, I don't think it's absolutely sure which one of them is going to win.
Sasha and then Jacoby.
Jacoby's been up for a while.
I don't think that whether Trump will be convicted and he will spend even a day in jail or not is so important issue. It's not. The most important issue, whether he, one way or another, will become indeed a president or not. That's the most important thing. Because the next days that he's becoming elected president, he will completely destroy United States as we know. It will be a dictatorship. He will take revenge on all people, like Justice Department and many others. He will completely start going vengefully, destroying all the
Sasha, you said the same thing before.
And this is my opinion, and you can agree with it or not.
Sasha, the thing is, right? Like we get it, right? You don't like Donald Trump very well. That you've always been very consistent about that. But comments like that he's going to turn the place into a dictatorship, he's immediately going to take over the country. Look, first of all, the US is too strong for that. But secondly, you made all of these sorts of predictions in 2016 when he won. It wasn't that bad. He didn't take over all government departments and do all these sorts of things that you're accusing him of. Jacoby, go for it.
So Sasha is correct in what he said, because Donald Trump literally said, "Man, this is my time. I've waited a very long time and raised my hand. If you want to laugh, please raise your hand."
Raise your hand.
So now you're going to talk over. Are we going to do this again today?
No,
Are we going to do this again today?
Jacoby, it's your turn, and then Kim's.
So again, what Sasha said is correct, because Donald Trump literally said that. He said that, oh, well, I may not be a dictator. No, I may not be a dictator for one day. So yes, he legitimately said that. His whole campaign right now has been a campaign of vengeance. He has talked about everything in terms of retribution and vengeance, the things that he would do. These are things that dictators and authoritarians do. As many people, even those in former Donald Trump's camp, I forget what her position was, but she was there are people that were in the room with Donald Trump that are even championing and currently saying that we are slow walking into a dictatorship because we're ignoring the warning signs based on tribalistic views and you looking at, oh, well, Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump right now is a major problem. To go back to Dan, earlier you said that everybody was doing great up under Donald Trump. In all honesty, everybody right now is doing better under actual Biden's policies, because the actual stock market is higher. The jobs rate is lower. Yes, everywhere in the world has high inflation, but you know where that came from? That came from COVID. We tend to forget that COVID started under Donald Trump. You cannot forget those years, and his handling of COVID was a problem. And then when we talk about, well, oil prices were lower. Well, of course they were lower. There was no demand for any oil at the time because the world was shut down. So we tend to forget about these things and just go on this beautiful view that Donald Trump did all these great things. No, Donald Trump was bad for a lot of people, especially how I see in the comments you talk about racism. Well, Donald Trump has a whole listing of he is well documented for things he said that were racist and things that he did that were racist, including.
Are you done with your rant?
Wait, Dan, I'll let you talk, man. You're not going to talk over me. So again, Dan, you're not going to talk over me.
Logic.
No, I have to finish my point.
It's Kim and then you, Dan.
including sharing a video that legitimately said white power and calling the person who said white power a great American. So things that he did were pretty porous and bad. There was a lot of bad things that he did. It's not that, the economy was so great. Honestly, the economy is actually better. We have an inflation problem based off of COVID, and that shut down the world. And in terms of all the countries who are dealing with inflation, we have the lowest. And honestly, in all the states that actually have the highest inflation, it's Florida. Florida is Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis currently, because of his policies, is having the highest inflation. And those are those Republican policies that we keep talking about. So again, we can't forget these things. We can't just ignore these things. And we can't just say Donald Trump's strong man. Well, so's Kim Jong-un. He's a strong man. Kim Jong-il's a strong man. Putin's a strong man, but they're all dictators. And that's what we're slow walking ourselves into.
Kim, you had a thought, and then I think it was Dan's turn, but Dan's gone out. So Kim, it's on you. I know you had talked about the bullying, and I was going to bring that up because of the whole gun incident that happened in Las Vegas. But if you had any thoughts around what we're talking about politically or anything else.
Well, I wanted to add, and I'm sad Dan dropped out, but I've been watching some of Donald Trump's speeches. He's going out and not really doing the debates. He's just doing his own speeches, which is probably why he'll win. But and in those speeches, he keeps talking about, and we will make them pay. I am going to win. And when I win, we will make them pay. We will make and I know he's talking about anyone who is against Trump. So, I just feel like, good God, I don't want to get audited again. I don't want to go through that again. And we all know that they use the IRS to audit people of opposite parties in the past. So, again, I wish Dan were here to hear the truth and the facts. And I was trying to look the videos up because I have them mostly on my phone, and I'll try to load them up for the next time. But he does. He goes out there and he campaigns, and I will win, and we're going to make them pay for everything they do to us. They lied about it. I should have won. And he's still harping on I should have won. He still hasn't even let that go. Somebody recently interviewed him, and instead of staying on the topic of her questions, he started ranting about, I can't believe this. I should have won, and I'm going to make them pay. And I'm like, he is all about his own agenda, not about the people. He wants to win to prove he can win. Will he do something for us? Maybe. But hey, you know what? Millions of Americans died because of him during COVID because he was too arrogant to go and hire in the pandemic team that he fired and promised that he would hire them back. And he's made other promises that he never kept. So, he makes all of these grandstand promises and grandstands everything. But honestly, he has done nothing for the people, nothing. And my family swears up and down that their life was better when he was in office. But he himself stated in one of these speeches, literally stated, the president coming in has to do a massive cleanup of the previous president. And I'm really going to hate coming in and clean up after Biden. Well, yeah, every president has to come in and clean up after the previous president because generally they did not have the same views and perspectives. And I will pass this on to Nick, seeing how Dan's not here.
Oh, you will. Good. Because I want to change the topic because we can talk about him at world politics. And I want to bring this up. What Mark brings up and our popular press doesn't bring up: Venezuela versus Guyana. This is right down south. And by the way, it's not a soccer match. Venezuela is already, what they did is they mobilized their army. And I did some research to find out how big their army is. Venezuela has 135,000 troops that they can mobilize on the border to take over basically South American oil. Venezuela is controlled by a near dictator. Okay, that's supported by who knows right now. But let me tell you how lopsided this war is going to be if it takes place. Guyana, which is really people of Indian descent, settled there as indentured servants. It's the only English-speaking country in Latin America. Their total army, including Air Force, Army, Marines, Navy, 7,500. 7,500 people versus 135,000. Ghana is going to get slaughtered. And it's even worse. Venezuela claims 2/3 of the country right now, and they're mobilizing. Now the real question is, and this is going to be a very interesting topic, and we'll see what happens if they invade. What will Biden do? Is this going to be another Afghanistan where, oh my Lord, might makes right, the Taliban comes and takes over? Or is the United States going to, put on their big boy pants and go down and defend Ghana? This could also turn the election. So you can forget Trump and Biden.
You're assuming that
this
Guyana,
might be the deciding factor is what happens in Latin America. Anyway,
Nick, you're assuming that Guyana has a right to that land. The issue here is that Venezuela, I would say, has got some legitimacy to that claim that disputed territory is theirs. We're not talking about all of Guyana here, right? We're talking about a particular area which has been under dispute. There's 11 million barrels or something of oil which has been found there, and Venezuela has always said actually that land was actually theirs, and this was ceded to Guyana when Guyana was still part of the British Empire. So now that there's wealth, in the past nobody's really cared too much about it. It's very sparsely populated. Nobody cared an awful lot. Now all of a sudden there's all that wealth there. It's probably a major reason as to why this area will be disputed. So who's going to be right and who's going to be wrong in a dispute like that, especially within the context of, or within the backdrop today of us saying that certain countries and certain empires unfairly colonized the world or unfairly drew borders and things like that. Now it would seem that certain people have a right to say, okay, well, we actually think that that's part of our land. Well, we should have that bit. So, and I still will renew my comment that Canada should claim Point Roberts for itself, because I can find absolutely no reason whatsoever for that to be part of the United States.
I think the bigger question that Nick, because I think what Nick brings up is great in terms of what will the U.S. do, and it's not just Biden, because this is going to go on for years. Because I think the bigger question is who is next. I think the dominoes started falling, and this is where I think Sasha is spot on that we cannot lose this war in Ukraine, because Ukraine was that first domino that really began to fall. So who is next? Is Taiwan going to be next with China? Is China going to claim the land of Taiwan and say, hey, the people of Chinese Taipei can no longer be there. So, hey, we're going to go ahead and fully take over that area. So I think the bigger question is kind of what the U.S. is going to do, but who's next? I think the biggest question is who's going to have the land that somebody, another major power is going to come in and say, or another power is going to come in and say, that's my land. I deserve that land. And then the money.
Just really quickly, in that same context, how much of the policing should we do? I brought it before because my dad worked there for a while. There's been a conflict forever, and I'm sure Shaquille is aware of it as well because he travels Africa and everything, between Eritrea and Ethiopia. And do we say that we're going to jump into Eritrea and Ethiopia as well? They've been in conflict for how long, Shaquille? I know that you've done African trade.
But see, here's the issue, right? We talk about countries, then we talk about different tribes and different groups of people within those countries that cross borders. These conflicts are a lot more complicated. It's not as easy for us to the way that we recognize the world, where you've got governments, local governments, and these different bodies, and you sort of have sovereignty and stuff. But we have no idea what it's like for these other countries where it's a much more fragmented system, where there are traditional rules and laws and cultures and customs that are being followed within those countries that governments are reluctant to step in on and say you can't do this, you can't do that, as well as the fact that there's an enormous amount of resources at play.
Here's the difference in Venezuela and Guyana versus Israel and Ukraine. If Venezuela invades Guyana, it's going to require American boots on the ground. Ghana does not have an army big enough to defend itself. I'm sorry. They have 130. It's 36 to 1.
But why is that? Why is that all of a sudden the U.S. is
We're going to be forced to make. Let's put it this way: whoever's in office is going to have to make big boy decisions. This could determine the election in the United States. If we back off.
But the question, Nick, is why is that all of a sudden the US's responsibility? And it sort of comes back to something that I've been saying now for quite a while. You either are going to admit that the West is in the business of nation building and is in the business of policing the world and bringing about peace in the way that we see fit, or we're not. But we can't pick and choose that we're going to be involved in some conflicts and not others. Okay? Look, there are some conflicts where that's unavoidable. I would say that if China wants to take over Taiwan, really, we don't really have much to say about that. We shouldn't really have much to say about that. Obviously, we'd be disappointed, but China has always considered Taiwan to be part of it. So, I think we have to be very careful that where we get involved.
But Shaquille, don't we already do that to some degree and everything? Because one of the things that I remember, even in the immigration debate, was this notion about how we treated one people because of where they were coming from. That the Haitians and the Cubans were not treated the same when they came across the border and everything. So isn't that something we've been doing, whether we want to do it or not, for decades? Because that was part of the argument around how we treat the Haitians versus the Cubans.
But the argument there that was being made was that Cuban Americans are more likely to vote Republican than vote Democrat, and so that the allegation was being made that the Biden administration didn't want them in because they weren't going to help to become a voting bloc for him. Look, there's some things that are about politics. There are some things that are just conspiracy theories and allegations. The bottom line is that we have to try to get some level of consistency. And, again, I think it's very alarming to me when we were on the Economics Monday show, we were talking about one of the departments, and I read the forward expectations for over the next 10 years as to how much debt's going to be on the books and how much the US economy is going to grow by. You've got a situation where the education department is producing kids at number 25 or 26 in the world, and you're no longer in the top 10. So you've got huge debt levels. You have an aging population. You have a healthcare crisis, a mental health care crisis. You have a huge homeless population. You have people that are struggling to get by, and all of a sudden, the US is focused on. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have any focus on it, but they're focused on conflicts that are in the Ukraine, in Israel, and Palestine. You've got a new issue that's happening down in Guyana and things like that. I mean, what would happen, just to use an example of something that's never going to happen, what would happen if Australia and New Zealand decide to go to war with Fiji and Tonga, for example? Is the US going to come in and get involved in there? Probably not, because we're, Five Eyes nations. But you can't get involved in every conflict. So then you go and have a look at Africa. Well, what about the Middle East, where we still have problems in Iraq and Syria, etc.? You still have issues in Iran. You still have issues in Lebanon. Is the US going to get involved in everything? Maybe it should. Maybe it shouldn't. I don't know. But I think that the idea of, okay, well, we're going to do something about this one. We're not going to do something about that one. You got to make up your mind. And
some of it's in our own backyards, because I know that it's Sasha, and then Jatovian will go a little bit over.
I'll just add one last thing. And now we've got King Charles, who's not supposed to be involved in politics at all, saying that the world should contribute $5 trillion to a climate change initiative. Charles Mountbatten, Windsor, shut up, sit there on your throne and be quiet.
Well, one thing I was going to say that Kim had brought up when she was here, which she had mentioned, which I did not know about this, but apparently Colombia, which is in Latin America as well, is looking at expiration for gas and oil contracts. And she was saying that this is really big news around the world. And I guess that's something that we also need to pay attention to, because that is also in our backyard.
Probably what will happen is the US will sweep down there and take the oil for themselves and then just leave the conflict between Guyana and Venezuela. Sasha?
I just said before, I can repeat myself. Yes, according to what you just presented, the best way for U.S. is to retreat in its shell, have capable defense against Canada and Mexico, forget about the rest of the world. And that's what Trump would do. And Trump, even in his first term, he was about to dismantle NATO. And if you read who wrote books from his own administration, like John Bolton and others. He was very close to do it. And he will do his second day in the office. He'll do it now if he will be elected. I still believe that America is not that mad to elect a felon, an idiot, the man completely incapable of being president. He is just not capable. He should not be elected even for a governor or even for a mayor of Oklahoma or something like that. He is just not there. He has a mind of 13 years old little idiot. That's all what he is.
Donald Trump.
Moron. That's all what he is. How the U.S. can elect a person like that, a criminal beyond any means, to be a president of mind you, I don't believe that. It's not going to happen.
Sasha, Trump issued an executive order prohibiting the U.S. government from discriminating against Christians and punishing expressions of faith. He also signed an executive order that allowed the government to withhold money from colleges and campuses that were deemed to be anti-Semitic and who failed to combat anti-Semitism. You seen anything like that coming from Biden's Democrats?
No, please, Shaquille, and only Trump can do these things in the world. There is no one else in Republican Party who can do it.
Democrats doing it. I'm not here to defend Donald Trump.
I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm not talking about merits, whether Democrats are better than Republicans. I'm talking about one single person. I'm talking about idiot. I'm talking about absolutely
these are executive orders.
Disqualified man to be a president of anything, even in a drugstore or just any 9/11 or a 7-Eleven store or anything like that.
9/11.
It's a fuck.
7-Eleven.
Go ahead and elect. I don't
Yeah, 7-Eleven. Toby?
Just to point out, the actual Biden and actually Kamala Harris just went out and did a whole speech about both the anti-Semitism and anti-Islamic rise. They have actually done a whole push on what you were talking about, saying that they didn't.
Speech is not executive.
Hey, Shaq, you're not going to overtalk me. So they've actually done that. Dan, don't do it. So in terms of Diana,
why don't you kick him off the show?
We'll go down this
Dan, I'll be off.
All you have to do is just don't overtalk me, and then I can get this point out. All you have to do is just listen. Thank you. So in terms of why the U.S. is jumping in to defend Guyana, is the fact that in U.S. policy, they are actually trying to defend other nations that are supporting democracy. Hence the reason why the consistency of going in with Ukraine. Ukraine is it has a democracy, and they're trying to protect it. Russia's trying to come over and take it over. And so the U.S. had to intervene with Russia and Ukraine. They're also trying, and Taiwan and China have an issue. And that's another concern that we should look at based on the way the world is going. So the U.S. I mean, I don't know, and I think Nick is correct. Is what will anybody sitting in that seat do? Will the actual the populace? That's another thing. And Sasha, I think you can agree with that. Is that the U.S. itself, as you can hear individuals from the Republican Party who don't even want to give money to Ukraine, it's just crazy. Will the U.S. itself as a nation have the appetite to help out Guyana and the people there? And because it seems like it's wavering with Ukraine, which is sad, because we should support Ukraine. And Sasha, I couldn't agree more. We cannot let Russia win that war, because again, the dominoes right now are falling. And Sasha, you're spot on. The dictator, if he gets back into office, it's going to be even worse, because he's going to do, just as you said, isolate us from the world. We're going to get hit with multiple problems. That's why COVID took off, is because he isolated us from the actual science to protect, that's actually protecting us from epidemics breaking out. So, Sasha, yeah, you're right on that. And again, I couldn't agree more.
Sasha, yes, something you want to add?
Okay, here's what I'd like to add. I'd like to add that situation is much more complicated than whether U.S. will help Ukraine or not. First of all, what's happened in Senate and the House now is a political banditism. The bandits from what's its name, Republican Party, they understand how important it is for Democrats and Biden to provide help to Ukraine. So to capitalize on it, they created an ultimatum that to get help to Ukraine, and 2/3 of American, they want U.S. to continue its help to Ukraine. But they're playing different games. They forgot that they're representing people or so. Now they're representing their own self-interest. And the self-interest of Republican in this respect is to make Biden to accept some ultimatum about the border issue, which is going on for 20 years. And there were discussions back and forth, and it's still not clear plan, actually, what's the best way to deal with that. But all of a sudden, because they figured out a vulnerability of Biden and Democrats on the Ukrainian issue, they decided to play all in and ultimatum. And okay, guys, okay, I know you don't want to do it, but you have to. Otherwise, you will not get any help to Ukraine, and you will lose election, and you will be nobody, and so on. So that's the game what they're playing. Now, why I'm saying, and neither Dan nor Shaquille even trying to understand what I'm saying, is that the real situation in the world is very different. That there is a perception that the great US with its friends from NATO, they will, if needed, they will crush Russia and all its Iran and China or whatever, North Korea if needed or so on. No, you will not. Russians will prove that even the U.S. was trying to help Ukraine and sending the HIMARS and ATACMS missiles or so on, and Russians are fighting with some weapons from Second World War, actually, and they're still successful because all these weapons from Second World War, they are capable to kill. They are not as sophisticated as NATO systems or U.S., but they're still capable to kill people. And that's what they're doing in Ukraine for almost 2 years. Furthermore, there are some very important issues that you should know. Ukraine, and this is very specific war. It's not something what U.S. was fighting for the last 50 years, some kind of wars, whether it's Vietnam or Afghanistan, or they're fighting against undeveloped nations, against tribes, because Afghanistan, nothing but tribes, same as Iraq, and so on. And they had enormous advantage in sea power, in air power, and just name it in any department. Now, here is a continental war. Forget about your F-16s and forget about all your the avia carriers or so on. They're useless. They're sitting ducks. They're targets. That's all what they are. So in continental war, you have to fight weapon per weapon, the grenade against grenade, the soldier against soldier. You don't have that great advantage because eventually, even if you will send F-16s to Ukraine, the Russian fighters, simply because of its numbers, they're not better than F-16s, but because of the sheer numbers, there will be 8 Russian warplanes against 1 F-16s. Guess what will happen? They will be all destroyed in a matter of a week, maybe 2 weeks. Okay, so the real issue in this war is only one. It's artillery. The artillery is the queen of war, and that's what's happened now between Russia and Ukraine. So Ukrainians need a lot of shells. So they ask US to supply shells. They ask NATO to supply shells. And you know, the NATO said that they can supply 1 million shells a year. So far, they supplied 300,000 and said that they have no more capacity to produce any more. What is the US capacity? Even less, 250,000 shells. That's it. US doesn't produce shells because they're fighting war against Afghanistan and Iraq, and they don't need shells for this type of war. In a continental war, yes, they need it, and they don't have it. They don't produce it. So if there will be continental war, the Germany now saying they need 3 to 7 years to prepare, provided that Ukraine will be able to fight Russia for another 3-4 years. But if Ukraine will not be able to fight Russia, then Germany has only 1 to 3 years. And there is no way that in 1 to 3 years, Germany will be ready for Russian assault. So now steps US. You believe that US will send troops to defend Germany? I don't. I just don't believe even a second that US will send its troops to fight for Germany or for Poland or for Baltic states or for France or whoever. US don't have a will. They have now all its great avia carrier in Israel, okay? And they have, by the way, 8 hostages, males, American citizens. They've been in Hamas custody. So normally US would have to say, come on, relieve them, let them go. No, US even not trying even to say a word for its own citizens. So what's happened is, and they, Hamas, learned it from Russia. Russia now has in captivity one US operative and another one a young journalist. And one is for a number of years already there, another one now almost 2 years there. What US can do? Okay, nothing. Nothing US can do. Okay, but this Russia, it's a nuclear power. Yeah, okay, so we understand. Now, what is Hamas? Is that nuclear power? Is that something that the US cannot deal with? How about US going to Qatar and says, and there are like top billionaires from Hamas, they live in Qatar. So what if US will say, Qatar, let the 8 hostages go and do it in 72 hours? What else? But they are not trying anything. They are scared to death to potential confrontation with Russia and China and so on. So they will talk a little bit here and there. Then they can't even get things done in their own Congress and Senate and so on. So they don't produce enough weapons. It's complete disarray. US, Nobody fears US anymore. Nobody cares about US anymore. And with the development of BRICS and its gold-based currency, US will be destroyed financially just as well, with its $34 trillion worth of debts, period.
I disagree with that. I mean, again, I'll agree that the war in Ukraine can't be lost. I'll agree with that. I'll agree that visibly, we don't know what's going on with the negotiations with Qatar and Hamas and Israel and about the U.S. citizens, and the same thing with the Palestinian people. We don't truly know that intricate negotiation system. So I can't say that nothing's going on there. I will not say that with the advent of BRICS, it's a gold-backed thing. And the gold back, it's a tangible thing that has a finite resource. Hence the reason why I guess we haven't ever gone to the gold, quote unquote, gold standard. We've never gone that way because it hasn't worked in our economy.
Wait, until 1971, it was gold-based currency, US dollar. It's Nixon. So that, of course, before
why did we shift away from it?
Well, because Nixon believed that because US dollar at that time was already established itself as a world reserve currency. So now he wanted to go even farther to strike down the gold-based US dollar. So now he can print as many US dollars as possible. So now US piggy bank on its strong established world currency, it can go much farther. It can multiply 8 times, 15 times, 100 times. And so, that's now coming to the end.
So so what I'm hearing is that because gold is a finite resource and it comes to an end, gold would come to an end. So whoever owns the gold owns the actual resources. But with what the U.S. did, moving away from it, made essentially the U.S. dollar the gold.
Again, but you see, because gold hasn't disappeared, so gold started to go higher in price because people understand that US, which is a dollar, which is untied to anything, you can print trillions and trillions almost like every half an hour. So what's going to happen? The gold will keep its real value. And, on my financial show, one of the participants said that the value of gold today is the same as 5,000 years ago. So 5,000 years ago, you can buy certain quantities of food, barneys and some other stuff. And same situation today, you still can buy for gold the same number.
So my question to you then, in it being just backed on a simple finite resource, what happens when that finite resource is worthless?
Well, the 5,000 years of history show us that this gold, even it's relatively scarce, yet it's still around. There, for example, like top gold producing companies like Barrick Gold, like Newmont Mining, and several others, they have proven reserves. They're not developing them yet because they have enough resources that they're mining gold right now, and it's enough for them to make profit and so on. But they have also proven resources.
Hey, Sasha, just a quick question to clarify even what Jacoby's asking, and we got to get ready to record the chess show shortly and everything, and get ready to end this show shortly and everything. But that being said, one of the things that I've heard, and I don't know because I'm not an economist and I'm not necessarily in investment the way you are, but you mentioned several times on this show and other shows that we could just print the money at the reserve and print as much money we want and all along those lines. But what I've heard is that if you continue to print the money and you don't put the money in a certain amount, that is when it becomes worthless and everything, because then it becomes like just anybody can print it. You can print it till it gets to the point of having no worth. That's what I've always heard. And if I'm learning incorrectly, correct me. But I've heard that if you print too much money, then the money becomes worthless.
Oh, that's what happened in Germany after First World War. The Deutschmark became almost worthless. People had to bring the 10 kilograms of their Deutschmark to buy a loaf of bread. That's what's happened in Germany after First World War. So, U.S. dollar is not in that situation because U.S. dollar still is the world reserved currency. However, as I'm saying, the BRICS, what is the plan? It's not that all one day BRICS announces, okay, here is a new currency, gold bag, US dollar, thank you very much, out. It's not going to happen in one day. First of all, they will have to adopt this new gold-baked currency. It means that for whatever they want to call it, the yuan or a ruble, or I don't know, whatever else they want to call it, it will be baked by gold. So every one unit, you can always not only buy something for it, but you can exchange in gold almost in any financial institution. Okay? So what's happened is that slowly they will start developing the trade among themselves. So there are 5 countries who are in BRICS right now, and they're planning to get also Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, even countries like Argentina and many others. So if that plan will be viable, but even just talk about like 5 actual members. So they will start trade among themselves using this new currency. Then they will, for example, sell something to France. So France will, of course, offer pay in euros. They will say, thank you very much, we don't need your euros. Please pay us in our currency. Oh, what? We don't have that currency. Well, buy it. So they will have to international exchange system, and they have to buy that currency. And the more in demand that currency slow will become, I'm talking about the process which will take 5, most likely even 10 years. But because that new currency will be backed by gold, and slowly it will become more and more available and desirable in order to trade with these 5, maybe even more countries, the more popular that currency will become.
A quick question on that note, then, so the U.S. has the most gold reserves of any nation. So,
at this time, yes.
So even with a gold-backed currency such as BRICS, wouldn't the U.S. still be the richest country?
It depends on, you're right about the gold reserves, but nobody knows how many dollars have been issued and how it corresponds. Let's see, U.S. indeed has the most potent gold reserves. I'm talking about gold bars kept in the depository of United States Federal Reserve, okay? So there are gold bars and there's a certain number of them. And let's see, it represents a value of, say, $10 trillion, just for a number. However, if the debt of the United States is $34 trillion, so obviously that gold of $10 trillion does not cover the debt of the United States. So the creditors can say, well, okay, you have gold of value of $10 trillion. Okay, we'll take it. Okay, now you don't owe $34 trillion, you own only $24 trillion. And how are you going to pay with $24 trillion? With what? Your dollars? We don't need your dollars.
But again, if one has the most gold reserves, wouldn't they control the bank?
Not really, because the debt is, as I said, if you control the gold bars, worth $10 trillion, but your debt is $34 trillion. So this gold reserves, which is the biggest in the world, does not cover your obligations. So you need something else. What it could be, maybe a silver, maybe something else, but US dollars is not covered by anything at all. It's covered by perceived economic might of United States. But United States looks now poorer and poorer in international relations. It cannot, in most cases, it cannot even normally negotiate very important political issues, neither inside the country nor outside the country. So the perception of US dollar as a world reserve currency is going all the way down as we speak.
But yeah, but the confusing part again, it still comes back to, for me, I just can't get it. It's hard to wrap and think that the one with the most gold doesn't have any power, because these with no gold or just a little gold, even combined, have less gold than this one.
That's not true. That's not true. The biggest gold producer in the world is South Africa. They're producing well over 50% of the gold in the world. Russia is producer of gold, and Russia has significant gold reserves. So is China. So is Brazil. So all these countries, I don't have materials in front of me to say what is their total gold reserves, but I wouldn't be surprised if they are twice bigger than those of the United States. But that's not an issue. The issue is that if these countries have, let's see, say $25 trillion of gold reserves, and their total debt is only $10 trillion. So they're sitting on a surplus of $15 trillion. US has $10 trillion, let's see, worth of gold reserves, but they're sitting on a deficit of $34 trillion. So you understand the difference. You cannot talk about just gold reserves as a standalone number. It always comes together with obligations. And if obligations are 3.5 times as big, that's very different picture. It doesn't matter that they have the biggest gold.
And that's the confusing part, because, for example, just pulling up the numbers, the U.S. has 8,133.5 tons. Russia only has 2,301.6 tons.
Okay.
And so
Where is China? Where is Brazil? Where is South Africa?
Russia took over the 5th spot. China's below. China, Brazil, and all of those are below Russia. The top 5 are U.S., Germany, Italy, France, and then Russia.
Okay.
And so the confusing part, I guess, on my end, seeing that the U.S. again has twice as much as the number 2 spot. Well, more than twice as much as the number 2 spot. But then on top of that, if we account for our debt, why do we not account for the debts of the other countries as well?
Let's do it.
The other countries also have debt. Like Russia has a huge debt. China has a huge debt.
What is Russia's debt at the moment? Do you know?
I can pull that up.
It's a fraction of U.S. debt.
How much debt is Russia in? Russia is, according to the U.S. Bank of Russia's estimate, external debt, Russia's Russian Federation as of September 30th, 2023, total 329 billion, having decreased by 54 billion, or by 14.1%.
And Jatovia, what is the percentage of Russia's debt is compared to U.S. debt of $34 trillion?
Well, you just said billion. I mean, Jacoby just said billion versus trillion, so that's a big gap.
Exactly.
Right,
this is my point.
Yeah.
This is my point, that it's a fraction of
And
what
I was just going to say, it says Russia's debt accounted for 16.1 of the country's national or nominal GDP in 2023.
Mm-hmm. And U.S.
The U.S. GDP.
U.S. GDP probably is, say, $15 trillion. So it's twice as much as the
GDP. Debt to GDP for the U.S. is 123% over.
Yeah.
Here we go.
That's
But again, this mathematical, although already quite horrible for the United States, but it can add up simply because of the U.S. dollars as the preeminent world reserve currency. There is nothing else that can match U.S. dollars.
Yeah, isn't part of the problem is we're getting to wind down and everything? Isn't part of the other problem that we allow a lot of other countries and people to come in here and invest in our country and everything? I'm not saying that they shouldn't, because I'm not going to knock somebody that is able to have their hustle and come from India or come from Brazil or come from wherever they're coming from, and all along those lines. I mean, I personally think, because I was having this conversation with somebody recently, Sasha, and you may find this interesting, and then we'll wrap up on this note and everything. But part of the reason that there might be some support, I'm not saying total support, but some support for the Middle Eastern countries, is because some of those Middle Eastern individuals also invested heavily into the African American population. Because one of the conversations around gentrification was who owns the 7-Elevens and who was bringing businesses into the African American communities. And I think even Jacoby would agree that there were a number of Arab individuals that came into some of our communities and invested in our communities, and that might be why some of the African American community is supporting some of the Arab communities, because they did some heavy investing in our communities, and sometimes even got some pushback from it. If you remember the movie Do the Right Thing, there was some pushback around some of the folks that invested, but they did invest heavily. I can tell you that just here in Durham, if I go to any 7-Eleven, it's probably owned by some people from either Asia or from Africa or some of the other countries as well. Any thoughts on that, Jacoby? And then we'll get ready to wrap up.
Well, I'll let you and Sasha finish that, because I gotta chase down this dog before it pees in the house and run off to a meeting.
Okay. We have to get ready for the chess show. Okay?
We'll get ready for
Sasha,
chess
I
show.
truly enjoyed this. Thank you. I enjoyed this conversation.
You're welcome, Jatovia. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right, get ready to get on out of here, and we'll get ready to wrap up, and we'll bring those other conversations up later. We do have world politics later on today as well. So let's get ready to get on out of here, and we've got the recording of the chess show later as well. So right now, getting on out.